I think that everyone has one game, TV show, or movie that you absolutely loved. At least until the end. Usually it's pretty easy to determine what went wrong, but sometimes it's not. Clinical Trials is one of those indie games that has you thinking about it for days and days. The enchanting dialogue and art draw you in, and you really feel for these characters, becoming invested in their lives, which makes it all the more heartbreaking to feel as though there was wasted potential. I say all this not to attack the creator and their work, but simply to open an honest discussion about the game, and what maybe could have been done better. Before we begin though, I would like to give two warnings. First, for spoilers. If you want to play the game yourself, it's free on itch.io. Second, a content warning. There will be discussion about mental illness, sexual assault, and murder. With that out of the way, let's begin. Clinical Trials is best understood as a play in 3 acts: the clinic, the house, and the basement. Our main character, Angel Martinez, is a young college dropout with ADHD who works a minimum wage food service job. They are here to participate in an 8-week clinical trial for a new ADHD medicine, with 1 meeting each week. The reward for completing this trial is $1,000, which they desperately need. Angel's situation from the very start is one of relative powerlessness, not completely without agency, but still quite limited. Money makes the world go round, and a lack of it leaves Angel forced to suffer through a lot of abuse from the world, as we will see later on. Our other main character is Lee, originally presumed to be a doctor, but later revealed to be just a nurse practitioner, a level below doctor, who is administering this clinical trial on behalf of the company. The first interaction between Angel and Lee is rough. Angel has not filled out any of the information they were supposed to, doodled all over the flyer, and has a ripped up insurance card. They also have criticism for the setup of the clinical trial itself, that it doesn't seem very well designed for its target audience, since the weekly appointments may be difficult to remember for those with ADHD. Lee is inclined to agree, but doesn't make the rules. They go through with the procedure, checking vitals, drawing blood, injecting medicine. Lee makes sure to read the script exactly as given to him, including to ask consent before touching Angel's arm to draw blood. All the while, Angel makes small comments to him about not wanting to go into work afterwards. It's worth noting that Lee, despite being in a far better situation than Angel, is actually similarly characterized here by a lack of agency, serving as a robotic middleman. He will also later express his replaceability at the clinic, since nurse practitioners are looked down upon by doctors. Lee and Angel both fundamentally operate in similar ways here, living day to day. It is the contrast in personalities, with Angel being disorganized and Lee being machine-like, combined with the feeling of being unable to meaningfully change the direction of their lives that gives them such good chemistry together. Over the course of the next few weekly appointments, Lee will administer psychological evaluations to Angel to gauge the effects of the medicine, through which Angel admits to struggling with many things. Angel ran away from their family because of the tremendous burden and pressure as a first-gen immigrant to cook, clean, translate, and go to college. Additionally, they are trapped with 2 roommates, both of whom dislike Angel and only use them for rent money. And Angel certainly doesn't have enough money to live by themselves. All of these things reinforce the original characterization that Angel is at the mercy of their circumstances, unable to meaningfully affect much due to a lack of money. In the same way that Angel opens up to Lee, Angel also gets to know Lee more personally, with Lee explaining his love for the fish tank and the shrimp inside. No one else at the workplace takes care of them correctly, so he has taken on the responsibility. Lee also complains about continuing education training. Once again, they bond over being at the mercy of their superiors and the inherent flaws in the system. The climax of these psychological evaluations comes in week 6, when Angel has a breakdown while receiving the injections and sprints out of the room as soon as they are done, leaving behind their jacket. In response, during week 7, Lee goes way off script to invite Angel to the rooftop to discuss things bothering them. It is revealed that in between week 5 and 6, a co-worker assaulted Angel, which caused the breakdown in week 6. Lee is obviously horrified and suggests leaving that workplace. But Angel can't leave. They need the money. And why should they have to leave when it was someone else who did something wrong? Angel breaks down in tears before running off. They proceed to miss their Week 8 appointment, with Lee anxiously waiting for them. For the sake of analysis, I would consider this to be the end of Act 1. Although we have one more day in the clinic, the tone of the game has shifted. It has revealed itself to not just be a commentary on ADHD, healthcare, and clinical trials, but also a story about victimhood. The transition between Act 1 and 2 is smooth, with the characterization of both Angel and Lee being very in line with a story about being abused. It is an unfortunate but natural conclusion that being poor, neurodivergent, and struggling in a system not built for them would be correlated with also being a victim in other ways. Act 2 begins with Angel returning to the clinic 2 days late, thinking that they are probably not able to finish the trial, but Lee is willing to administer the final test. Angel reflects upon how it may have been a bad time to start a new medicine, since there is so much going on, that maybe their mind has been scattered because of it, perhaps willing to cope with the assault by blaming the medicine for leaving them vulnerable. But Lee breaks the news to Angel. They were in the control group, meaning the medicine was fake, a complete placebo. At the end of the test, Angel heads off to work. They almost make it out the door before Lee runs to them. Lee begs Angel not to go, and instead come with him, to stay away from everything at work, even offering money. Angel accepts, desiring the opportunity to take some time off. The rest of Act 2 takes place at Lee's house, which is on the outskirts of town, quite isolated. Lee offers Angel the bed and for him to sleep on the couch, but Angel insists that the couch is fine. They sleep for a long time, obviously needing the rest. After waking up, Angel and Lee also cook together, commenting about how they both find it hard to cook alone, for different reasons. Lee only eats pre-made meals to reduce the amount of choice he has to make and his lack of ability to cook. Angel has a hard time finding the energy to cook if it's not for others. Lee and Angel also spend time together looking outside at a pond through a microscope. All of these things are relatively normal, but are significant because Angel is not able to experience this kind of quiet and healthy life very often. Lee showing Angel microbes under the microscope reminds me a lot of children exploring the world, something that someone with a troubled childhood might not get to experience. The defining moment of Act 2 comes when Angel goes upstairs to Lee and gets into his bed. Lee thinks that the couch has become uncomfortable and prepares to switch with Angel, but Angel states that they want to sleep next to him. Nothing happens besides sleep. They eat together, hang out, and have a relaxed day. The next night, Angel returns. They have a conversation about how they feel. Lee doesn't want to make Angel uncomfortable or make it seem like he expects anything to happen with all that Angel has been through. Angel responds, "What if I want something to happen? How long after getting assaulted am I allowed to want stuff to happen? Do I not feel bad enough? Am I acting too normal? I don't want to be treated differently because of it." Lee apologizes and Angel hugs him. Nothing more happens afterwards. For somewhat obvious reasons, it is common for assault victims to struggle to have a healthy connection to their sexuality, either becoming avoidant of it entirely or becoming hypersexual. Here, Angel is actually showing a lot of agency and asserting what they want, which is in contrast to the passiveness displayed throughout the first act of the game. It is perhaps a sign that Lee has created a safe space for Angel to heal. The story will diverge rapidly from here, but at the moment the story has crafted a somewhat dark but perhaps still heartwarming story of two people who found each other when they needed them the most. Lee offers Angel a safe place to get away from everything without the expectation of anything in return. The only return Angel gives to Lee is company and the reassurance that she is safe, which he obviously cares about. This is not to say that the relationship is necessarily good, because they are still fundamentally a doctor-patient in a sense. But maybe not as bad because he acted as a clinical trial administrator rather than a real personal doctor. But this sort of relationship as it is portrayed here is interesting, a morally gray one for sure, but life is not without its complexities, and I think it adds to the game's commentary on the nature of being a victim and healing. One could make nuanced arguments for Angel to stay with Lee, or for the relationship to slow down and instead just be friends. I think the game would have been an excellent piece on relationships, being neurodivergent, and navigating situations where you feel like a cog in the machine. It instills decently healthy messages about recovery and asserting what you really want. But time marches on to Act 3. As Angel begins to get more comfortable around the house, they wonder about the cellular service in the area. It has been explained that the house is remote and that the service is not good, but Angel's convinced that they can find a solution. Exploring around the house, they find a cable. They pull it out, but it isn't an internet connection cable. It seems to pop something open, and to the right, light peers out of a bookshelf. Behind it comes the big twist. Pictures of Angel taped to the wall, pieces of hair and bloody tissue from when they visited the clinic, and their jacket. Lee is a stalker. Lee appears behind you, but doesn't really have a good excuse. He just seems to be ashamed of being caught in the act. And to make matters worse, if you try to take the jacket, he freaks out and runs it down to the washer. It is heavily implied that bodily fluids were all over the jacket. Here you have an option to accept or reject Lee. If you reject Lee, Angel expresses how disturbing it all is. They can't believe that they thought Lee actually liked them as a person. But no, Lee was manipulating them the whole time. Angel laments. Why? Why does this keep happening to me? They try to walk out, but Lee won't let them, insisting that they need to be driven, since there are no bus stops for miles. He just needs 30 minutes to wash the jacket and get his stuff together. In the meantime, Angel continues to search for the router to restore the internet, and ventures into their closet. To their horror, they find a signal jammer, meaning Lee has been the cause of no phone service. They turn it off to reveal that there are no new messages anyways, but it is still disturbing. Then they notice a hole to the left. It leads to a staircase, a secret room, and at the bottom they find something even scarier than the stalker wall. At the bottom lies the lifeless body of the co-worker who assaulted them. Lee walks in behind them. Lee can't do much else besides come clean at this point. He reveals that he kidnapped the co-worker and brought him to the basement tied up, and then proceeded to use his medical knowledge to drill a hole into the co-worker's nervous system to paralyze them, so that he would spend the last hours being unable to move and slowly dying in great pain. Angel, of course, questions why Lee would do all this, when all Angel wanted was to move on. Lee explains that they can still get out of this, they just need to cover up the body. If you rejected him before, your only option is to reject him again. If you reject Lee, Angel explains to Lee that he never should have done this. This wasn't what Angel wanted. Lee understands, and grabs the power drill he used on the co-worker. He stands in the corner and tells Angel to leave in under 10 seconds. After waiting 10 seconds, he then drills into his own head. Angel runs out of the house, and tells himself that somehow they will have to make it through this. The game ends, fade to black. This is ending 1. If instead of rejecting Lee you accept his stalker behavior, Angel is more understanding of Lee, chalking the stalking up to extreme loneliness. Angel makes the argument that Lee needs help, but so do they. If Lee's life is over, where would that leave them? A broke college student dropout with no future. They tell Lee that if he is willing to treat them like a normal person from here on out, things could still work. Lee goes off to wash the jacket and take a shower. Angel still looks for the signal jammer and finds the dead body. If you choose to accept Lee again after he admits to all the murder, Angel logics out that even if Lee is dangerous, he won't hurt them, since he would have already done it if he was going to. Maybe it's better this way. If the co-worker is dead, he can't hurt anyone else. They work out how they're gonna hide the body, and the game ends. This time, instead of fading to black, there is a fully drawn out and animated cutscene. They bury the body, move, and live a happy life together. This is ending 2. Act 3 of this game is where I really feel the game stumbles, and I take a lot of issue with the way that the endings were handled. One major thing I would like to point towards is the contrast between ending 1 and ending 2. Lee is a stalker, collecting everything. but not just in an obsessive way, but also in an abusive way. Perhaps the jacket in the wall of pictures could actually be excused away as loneliness because they, although gross, were never meant to be seen or to hurt Angel. In contrast, the signal jamming and taking Angel to a remote location where Angel has no access to transport and not allowing them to leave is very controlling and manipulative. It isn't very consistent with the idea that Lee would never hurt Angel because these kind of behaviors are already abusive and controlling. There's no telling what realistically those behaviors could turn into if Angel were to ever try to leave Lee. I think for that reason, Angel acts completely unrealistically in Ending 2. Her conclusion that Lee wouldn't hurt them is naive at best, and defending abusive behavior at worst. One could excuse this as being a part of Angel's character as a young and stupid person, but I feel as though they have been otherwise characterized as a very emotionally mature and intelligent person. I would also like to draw attention to the difference in the treatment between Ending 1 and 2, with the first simply fading to black and the other having fully animated cutscenes. One could argue that this is done to leave the first ending up to interpretation, but I also feel as though it may signal a bias by the creator to which ending they focused more on. All of these things combined make me feel as though Ending 2 is quite forced and not well written. I also feel as though the twists in Act 3 undermine a lot of the meaningfulness that the game had in the first two acts as a serious discussion of serious topics. It poses such emotional maturity and nuanced discussions only to really drop the ball in order to defend abusive behavior for the sake of having Angel and Lee ending up together. Throughout this analysis, I have been following a linear story from the perspective of Angel, but I would also like to offer an alternative reading of the story, one from the perspective of Lee. Now, I'm not a theater expert, so I am using an online source to help me understand the format. It goes as follows. The tragic hero wants something, very badly, a MacGuffin. We can see this in Lee's desire for Angel. Then the hero starts the journey, and things go strangely well for the hero. We can see this in Angel falling right into Lee's arms and the relationship developing well at the clinic. Then the hero hits a roadblock and commits a dark act that will seal their fate. Lee kills Angel's co-worker. Then the plans begin to unravel, and the darkness within the tragic hero catches up to them. In other words, Angel finds the stalker room and the body. Finally, the tragic hero reaches his end, drilling into his own head. This reading makes a lot of sense, but only if you are willing to sideline Angel in their own story, of which I am hesitant to do because the first two parts of the game build up Angel as a character so much. Additionally, it is not often that in the tragedy, the main character actually wins after all, as Lee does in Ending 2. I say all this to find that the first two parts of the game feel quite disjoint from the third part, and not in a good way. Now, of course, I am not an expert writer or anything, and a lot of this analysis has just been my opinion, but I feel as if it would be kind of cheap to criticize without offering potential solutions. One idea I would consider is toning down the stalker aspects while keeping the murder. It is generally considered bad to kill people, even abusers, but I think that Lee could still be seen as a nuanced character with it. In contrast, as it currently is, the extent to which Lee is controlling and obsessive over Angel makes him quite indefensible, and I find it incompatible with Lee and Angel having a happy ending. The game spends 2/3 of the game building up this nuanced and complex relationship to completely kill all the nuance in the end. Softening Lee could help this. Another potential solution is to rework the endings. I would personally like to see more attention given to Angel in the first and second endings. Giving Angel far more agency and self-determination would work well with the messages of the first two parts of the game. It could still be vague, but Angel should have at least something go right for them. At the moment, in both endings, Angel is still a prisoner of circumstance, either to return to the horrible situation that they were in, or go to a new horrible situation. Just something going right would make the journey of the first two parts of the game feel more meaningful. Overall, I found Clinical Trials to be an enjoyable game with a lot of potential, even if I didn't like the endings. If its only goal was to make you think a little bit, it certainly did that. And it goes without saying that none of my opinions are objective. If you agree or disagree, I would love to hear your thoughts. But for now, I think I have said all I have to say. Thank you to my supporters and subscribers. Thank you, and see you next week.